be confused with a John the Baptist, a different person. John appears to have been the most influential of Jesus' disciples, and an earlier biblical text that is attributed to him, the book of John, seems to come closest to conveying the strong mystical leanings of Jesus' backers and of the early Christian church. For these and other reasons, the name of John has been an important one to Christians and to a number of mystical organizations. It is perhaps not surprising then that John's name would be chosen to convey the final and most colorful apocalypse in the Bible. The Revelation of St. John is the fifth and final work attributed to John to appear in the New Testament. Some scholars believe that Revelation was written by John while he was living in exile on the Greek island of Patmos, many years after the crucifixion of Christ. Well, what's interesting is off the Greek island of Patmos, you have that whole area right there where there's sunken cities underneath the water and stuff. And off the island of Patmos is actually where they found the Antikythera mechanism, which is this clockwork mesh gear mechanism that accurately tracks the movement of the stars, and was made, thousands of years before man is said to have had any sort of clockwork gear mechanisms like that. There's a video on YouTube where somebody made one out of Antikythera mechanism replica that works out of Legos. Oh, it was awesome. But isn't that interesting that it said that the book of Revelation was written on the island of Patmos? And so if it's true that the custodians had a hand in creating the hellfire and brimstone book of Revelation ideologies, then it would stand to reason that the Antikythera mechanism was also a device that was created by these custodians and then, of course, dumped in the water in the sea off the island of Patmos so that no one would find it and understand that, okay, well, obviously somebody with high technology was here near the island of Patmos doing something. And then again, coincidentally, that's where the book of Revelation was supposedly written at. That's pretty interesting, folks. A piece of, obvious, what else could it be? Alien type technology found off the same coast where the book of Revelation was written. Oh, come on. Others are convinced that the disciple John was not the author of Revelation because Revelation was not discovered until about 200 years after John's lifetime. According to Joseph Free, writing in his book Archaeology and Bible History, the linguistic qualities of Revelation are inferior in some ways to the book of John. It is argued that if Revelation was written 5 years after the book of John by the same person, Revelation should be linguistically equal to or superior to the earlier work. Another point is that Revelation contains expressions from the Hebrew language that were not used in John's earlier writings. On the other hand, important similarities between Revelation and other books of John have been noted, especially in the repetition of certain words and phrases. Whatever the true authorship of Revelation may be, the impact of this work has been major. Revelation is the first-person account of the author's bizarre meeting with a strange person he believed to be Jesus. Over a period of a day or two, the author also met a number of unusual creatures, which showed him pictures of frightening future events. I'm sorry, I just paused there for a minute. The stream's not dead or anything. I'm sorry, I got to read that again because it just blows my mind, the synchronicity. I'll tell you this story in just a minute. Let me read that again. A bizarre meeting with a strange person he believed to be Jesus. Over a period of a day or two, the author also met a number of unusual creatures which showed him pictures of frightening future events. Now, the other night on the show, I was describing this thing that happened to me where I saw this. It was the only time in my life I've ever seen one of these. And I saw an entity, what I described as a demon, a figure in black. I talked about that on the show the other night, Monday night. And one of our listeners had sent me an email, and this woman had asked me if if I'd heard of the shadow people and whatnot, if I thought that's what that was, and I've heard of the shadow people and all that. But this didn't seem like the shadow people. This seemed more like a demonic entity of some sort. But I have had an experience with these quote unquote shadow people. And that's what made me think of this was this line where it says, the author also met a number of unusual creatures that showed him pictures of frightening future events. Well, one time I was under the influence of some hallucinogenic drugs. And they were so good, I can't remember what they were. Mushrooms, acid, I don't know. Ecstasy, who knows? I was under the influence of something. I can't remember. But I do remember this. I was sitting on a patio, and it was a balcony, it was overlooking a parking lot. And I could see this, almost this fine layer of mesh between our perceived reality and the non-perceived reality. And I could just see black figures everywhere. And later on, I found out that's what people refer to as the shadow people, what appear to be entities that are around us at all times, which our senses can't see or perceive, unless in heightened states or in other altered states of consciousness. But I saw these two figures go up to the hood of a truck, and I was just describing this to this young lady who's one of our listeners, Allison. I was explaining to this person that, you know, this whole story, because she mentioned she had an experience where she went into a bar, and it was kind of that, you know, kind of that same thing. She felt like she walked in this bar and felt like everybody in this bar were aliens, you know, and she was the only one that was normal, and everybody was on drugs or something. But I saw these two shadow people walk up to a white pickup truck and rip the hood off of a pickup truck. And then they stretched it out and made like a movie screen out of it. And then they were projecting images of nuclear war and all this different, stuff on the screen in front of me. And so that's why I paused right there. It was just synchronicity. I was reading that and I was going, my God, that's almost identical to the experience that I had, of course, under the influence of a hallucinogen. But that doesn't make it any less real, folks. That's another thing we got to understand. Just, we're conditioned also to believe that because we see things or have visions under the influence of hallucinogenic drugs, that makes them any less real. No, that's what those things are there for. You understand? That's why they don't want us using them. That's one of the secrets of the priest class is using these drugs and these tools naturally found here on Earth. I mean, my God, psilocybin mushrooms, it's a plant. Ergot, which you can synthesize LSD out of, is a fungus. It's bread, mold. These are what they're there for. So it just blew my mind that, this idea of John seeing these creatures. And I was just telling that person, one of our listeners, about that. Wow, crazy fucking synchronicity, man, I tell you. Where did I leave off here? It said that over a period of a day or two, the author also met a number of unusual creatures which showed him pictures of frightening future events. The author was told by those creatures that Satan, the Antichrist, would take over the world. This would be followed by the final battle of Armageddon, during which the angels of God would battle the forces of Satan. The final battle would bring about the banishment of Satan from human society and the triumphant return, the second coming of Jesus to reign over earth for 1,000 years. The book of Revelation is written in a wonderfully picturesque manner. It is filled with complex and imaginative symbolism. Because the pictures revealed to John were symbols, Revelation can also be used to predict an imminent end of the world in almost any historical epoch. The prophecy is constructed so that the symbols can be interpreted to represent whatever historical events happen to be occurring at the time in which one is living. This is precisely what has been done with Revelation ever since it appeared, and it is still being done this way today. Yes, by the custodial priest class masters, I would add. The question is, what caused the author's visions? Was it lunacy? A propensity to tell tall tales? Or was it something else? The author seems sincere enough to rule out deceit. His straightforward manner of narration tends to eliminate lunacy as the answer. That leaves something else. The question is, what? Upon analyzing the text of Revelation, we discover something rather remarkable. It appears that the author had actually been drugged, and while in that drugged state, was shown pictures in a book by individuals who were wearing costumes and putting on a ceremony for the author's benefit. Let us look at the passages of Revelation which suggest this. John begins his story by telling us that he was at prayer. From a further description, it seems that he was conducting his ritual outdoors during daylight hours. Suddenly, a loud voice resounded behind him. The voice commanded him to write down everything he was about to see or hear and to tell the message to the 7 Christian churches in Asia or Turkey. John turned around to see who was speaking to him. Isn't that interesting? Because in Turkey, wow. Huh. John turned around to see who was speaking to him, and lo and behold, there he saw what he believed to be 7 golden candlesticks. My fucking menorah? Never mind. Standing among the candlesticks was a person whom the author described as one who looked like the Son of Man, Jesus, clothed with a garment down to the foot and wearing about the chest a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as flame of fire. And his feet were like fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace. And his voice was as the sound of many waters. Sounds like his motherfucker was a robot. And he had in his right hand, a fucking cyborg or something, and he had in his right hand 7 stars. And out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword. And his appearance was like the sun shines in his strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. And he laid his right hand upon me. There are striking similarities between this new Jesus and the space-age angels of earlier biblical stories. The prophet Ezekiel, for example, also had met visitors with feet of brass. The above passage from Revelation suggests that John's Jesus may have been garbed in a one-piece bodysuit extending from the neck down to metal or metal-like boots. The creature's head was described as white like wool and white as snow, indicating an artificial head covering or helmet. John's claim of this creature had a voice as the sound of many waters, that is, rumbling and thunderous, is also reminiscent of Ezekiel's angels and could have been caused by the rumbling of nearby engines or by electronic amplification of the creature's voice. The 2-edged sword protruding from the creature's mouth easily suggests a microphone or a breathing pipe. After John regained his composure, Jesus commanded him to write down the missives that, quote-unquote, Jesus wanted him to send to various Christian churches. See, I see where this is going. I was exactly right, yeah. So this thing appeared to John, tricked him into believing he was Jesus, and had him write down this book of Revelation thing, and then that's where the book of Revelations came from. Again, it was installed into us and into Christianity by the custodians, by the extraterrestrials. I mean, I've always known that, man. I've always known that shit was a fraud, was a lie, was being put there by somebody. God, it all makes, again, I've been saying this the whole time we've been reading this, but it all makes sense now, doesn't it? It does, more and more every day. The most interesting phase of John's experience then begins in chapter 4. I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard, which sounded like a trumpet talking with me, said, "Come up here, and I will show you things which must take place hereafter." And immediately I was in the Spirit, and look, a throne was set in heaven, and one creature sat on that throne. And the one who sat looked to me like a jasper and a sardine stone. Jasper and sardine stone. That would be like black and white or black and silver, wouldn't it? Jasper and sardine. That's odd. And there was a rainbow around the throne looking like an emerald. And all around the throne were 24 seats. And upon the seats, I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white garments. And they had on their heads crowns of gold. And out of the throne came lightnings and thundering voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God, or the 7 extraterrestrial races, or whatever they are. And therefore the throne, there was a sea of glass like crystal in the midst of the throne, and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes in front and back. So there was these creatures with eyes all over them. The above passage can be viewed as the author being taken up through the door of some sort of aircraft and finding himself face to face with its occupants as told by someone incapable of understanding the experience. The quote contains 2 especially interesting elements. First, John said that a voice from above sounded like a trumpet talking with him. This strongly suggests a voice bellowing through a loudspeaker. Second, the lightnings and thunderings and voices emitting from the throne suggest that the throne had a television or radio set of some kind. A modern human might well describe the same experience this way. Well, yes, I was lifted up into a rocket ship, and there I confirmed the seated crew in their white jumpsuits and helmets, and they had some radio or TV reception going. The presence of 7 candles and 7 lamps indicates that a ritual had been prepared for the author. The ritual was replete with costumes, theatrics, and sound effects. Sounds like Bohemian Grove, right? Costumes, theatrics, sound effects, Bohemian Grove. All designed to deeply impress the message upon the author. This is what happened when John was shown the first scroll. And I saw in the right hand of the one who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on the inside and on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the book and to loosen the seals of it?" And no man in heaven, nor in earth, nor from under the earth was able to open the book, nor to look upon its contents. Under the earth. Notice they reference inner earth beings there. I've heard people talk about that before, but I didn't know exactly, could never identify what passage it was from, but there it is right there. I think it happens multiple times where they're obviously referencing entities inside of the earth. I'll read it again. And no man in heaven, nor in earth, meaning the inner earth dwellers, the people that live inside of the earth. And from what I understand, it's referenced several times in the Bible, but I wanted to point that out since we're reading that here, that's a fine example of them, and nor from under the earth as well, was able to open the book, nor to look upon its contents. And I wept a great deal, because no man was found worthy to open and to read the book, nor to look upon its contents. And one of the elders said to me, "Weep not. Look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has succeeded to open the book and to loosen its 7 seals." And I, standing between the throne of the 4 beasts and in the midst of the elders, a lamb in the manner of having been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out to all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of the one who sat upon the throne. And when he had taken back the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders fell before the Lamb, each of them holding harps and golden containers full of odors, which are the prayers of saints. And they sung a new song, saying, "You are worthy to take the book and to open the seals of it, for you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood from every family, language, people, and nation, and have made us into kings and priests to God, and we shall reign on earth." And I saw and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne and the beasts and the elders, and they numbered 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing." And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, and those that are in the sea, and all that are in them, heard I saying, "Blessing and honor and glory and power be to him that sits upon the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever." And the 4 beasts said, "Amen." And the 24 elders fell down and worshiped him that lived forever and ever. The elders continued to fall at dramatic moments throughout the ceremony. Each time they did so, they made quite an impression upon John. Among their cries of "Amen," "Amen," "Amen Ra," and "Alleluia" or "Hallelujah," the author was given the somber task of writing down everything he was being shown and taught. It has been pointed out that the experience John described is identical to mystical ritual, especially of initiation into the teachings of a secret society. For this reason, some people believe that Revelation is actually an account of an initiation ceremony, typical of many brotherhood organizations, typical even today. These observations are quite significant when they are coupled with the evidence that John's experience had an element of space opera. It reveals continued custodial involvement in brotherhood mysticism after the time of Christ and shows custodians to be the ultimate source of apocalyptic doctrines. In the above passage from Revelation, we observe that John reacted with strong emotions to what was going on around him. He was especially prone to weeping on relatively little provocation. He seemed unable to distinguish between ritual and apparent reality. Oh, yeah. So the ritual, that's when the ritual becomes real. You know, the entities and the energy comes out. He couldn't determine what was ritual and what was real. Oh, yeah. That's a good sign. This raises questions about his mental state. No, man, not really. He saw some shit. It probably fucked him up when you see, you know, think about people out in the ancient times when they see people in, you know, with high technology. Yeah, it probably blew his mind out. A careful reading of Revelation indicates that John's mind may have been influenced by drugs administered to him by the creatures. That's what I was telling you earlier. Isn't that interesting? Because I was talking about my experience, you know, 10 years ago or whatever it was, being under the influence of some hallucinogens and seeing, you know, these creatures showing me visions on a screen of, you know, nuclear weapons and stuff going off. And it says right here, the custodians gave John hallucinogenic drugs. Well, ABC News reported a few years ago that Moses was tripping balls on DMT, ayahuasca, because there was evidence that that was used by Moses, and it's found, all the alkaloids are found right around Mount Sinai. So yeah, he couldn't tell what was reality and what wasn't, and couldn't tell the difference between the ritual and reality, because in the ritual, he was tripping fucking balls. And you see this, and it sets quite a pattern for the idea of the custodians or extraterrestrials or gods or spirits or whatever else transferring information to humans through these different psychoactive compounds like psilocybin, mescaline, LSD, etc., specifically ones that are found naturally occurring on the planet like ergots and fungus and the rest of this. The author was apparently outdoors again, preparing to memorialize the latest revelations when an angel flew down from the sky holding something in his hands. And the voice which I heard from heaven spoke to me again and said, "Go and take the little scroll which is upon the hand of the angel, which stands upon the sea and upon the earth." And I went to the angel and said to him, "Give me the little scroll." And he said to me, "Take it and eat it, and it will make your belly bitter, but it will be in your mouth as sweet as honey." And I took the little scroll out of the angel's hand, and I ate it up. And it was in my mouth, sweet as honey, and I had eaten it, and my belly was bitter. And he said to me, "You must preach again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings." Most Christians believe that the little scroll offered to John was an actual document, the contents of which the author magically came to know by eating the scroll. He ate the scroll, which was dun 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 dun, bum bum ba dum bum 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 ba dum bum. Little white rabbit for you. Oh yeah, he was from balls, boy. Yeah. Oh. So he ate it, and when he ate it, he had information transmitted to it. Hello? It's called shamanism. Maybe you've heard of it. Our clue that it was probably paper or something else saturated with the drug. Oh, shit. They didn't even give him the good shit. They gave him fucking blotter or something, didn't they? They just fucking hosed down. Oh, just give John some blotter, man. That's good enough. It's going to fry his mind. He's never done any shit anyway. God damn, don't give him any liquid. Fuck. Interestingly, the drug was sweet to the taste, but caused a bitter reaction in the stomach. Interestingly, an almost identical experience has been reported by Ezekiel. And when I looked, a hand of an angel was put before me, and a scroll was in it. And he spread it before me, and it had writing inside and out. And there were written lamentations and mourning and woe. Additionally, he said to me, Son of man, eat what you are finding. Eat this scroll and go to speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that scroll. And he said to me, Son of man, make your belly eat and fill your bowels with this scroll that I give you. Or maybe this is like that from Battleship Earth or Battlefield Earth or something, you know? Remember when Travolta thinks that the humans like to eat rats, raw rats, because that's all they get? And he's, oh, the rats. Oh, the rat brains. They like to eat rats. That's a treat for them. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe these idiot custodians were, you know, thought that we like to eat paper or something. Then I ate it. I know I'm aware that I'm gonna get 20 emails and people are gonna go, it's being symbolic. Yes, I'm aware. Don't send me goddamn emails saying it wasn't really eating paper. It's symbolic. Yes, I know. I'm making a joke. Thank you. Then I ate it, and it was in my mouth as sweet as honey. And he said to me, Son of man, go get yourself over to the house of Israel and speak my words to them. Yeah. Here, eat this drug. Let me get inside of your mind and put my thoughts and my words inside of your brain. And then when you get done with that, I need you to go over to the people of Israel and go preach this to them. Okay? Thanks. My God. All of this shit was set up by extraterrestrials. All of this shit was set up to keep us in control and to keep us to do what they want us to do, folks. All of it. Many people mistakenly believe that John actually saw the future historical events he prophesied in Revelation. It has been pointed out by Christian and non-Christian scholars alike that John's visions of the future were surprisingly simply illustrated down and drawn on scrolls. This is especially evident in John's vision of the creature with 7 heads and 10 horns. As I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads blasphemous names. The fact that the actual words blasphemous names were written upon the heads of this creature revealed that John was looking at an illustration with labels, much like an old-fashioned political cartoon. Although the author does not specifically say so, it is likely that many other visions on the scrolls were labeled in a similar fashion. There can be no doubt that as literature, the book of Revelation is a colorful, dramatic, and hard-hitting work. As the basis for a religious philosophy, however, it has all the pitfalls of the apocalypses which came before it. As we shall see, the prophecy made in Revelation has been fulfilled at least a half dozen times in world history, complete with global catastrophe followed by second comings. Not once has this brought about 1,000 years of peace and spiritual salvation. All it has done is set the stage for the next catastrophe. Today, as we stand on a massive nuclear powder keg, perhaps it is time to reevaluate the usefulness of apocalyptic belief before the world is plunged into yet another final battle. Yes, spiritual salvation and 1,000 years of peace are goals well worth having and are long overdue. But there is no need to pay the price of an Armageddon to achieve them. So that's the end of chapter 13 there. The next chapter is chapter 14, the plagues of Justinian. As we leave the time of Jesus and enter the AD years, history becomes firmer and personalities come into better focus. Documentation is better. Even so, the same historical patterns we have studied continue undiminished. To those who find what we have looked at thus, let me start that over. To those who find what we've looked at thus far completely unbelievable, I can only share that feeling with full empathy. The view of history I am presenting seems to demand an understanding that the factors which lie at the bottom of human turmoil may be extremely bizarre factors. Perhaps that is why they have never been resolved. I would agree with that 100%. 100% I would agree with that statement. The factors which lie at the bottom of human turmoil may be extremely bizarre factors. Yeah, they are. I'll tell you that. That's one thing I can tell you with all certainty. I may not be able to define, and none of us can. Nobody out there can yet. We just don't have all the information. So none of us can really clearly define what is controlling and running this whole thing. But you know what? We have enough evidence, and I think just about any researcher out there, unless they were a complete priest class minion. You'd be hard pressed to find too many researchers who wouldn't agree with the fact that they found in their own research with whatever topics it may be that there is something a lot more sinister and a lot more dark and a lot more negative and nasty than just, this easy explanation of Jews and bankers and, priests and pedophiles and all this stuff. You understand what I mean? I mean, I think I don't think I've ever come across a researcher that I ever met or talked to that hadn't said that yeah, we know this much, we know up to this point, but there definitely is something darker and more sinister that's really running this whole show. What that is and what it entails, none of us really know at this point. It's really it really is just the way it is. It's exactly a great way of describing it. So, after the lifetime of Jesus, the Christian church grew rapidly. In its early years, Christianity attracted a large number of genuine humanitarians who were enthused by the message Jesus tried to put forth. Early Christian leaders, despite the Essene influence, were able to promote a rather benign religion with many benefits. Jesus had not failed entirely. Early Christians gave people the hope that they could achieve spiritual salvation by acquiring knowledge and by engaging in ethical conduct, by unburdening themselves through a confession of wrongdoing, and by making amends for those transgressions which caused a person to suffer guilt. Given the benign character of the early Christian church, it did not need a harsh code of ethics. The severest punishment a person could suffer in most Christian sects at that time was excommunication, i.e., being kicked out. That was considered a very severe punishment. However, because an individual was considered doomed to eternal spiritual deterioration if he or she was excommunicated, a priest was obliged to do everything he could to appeal to a person's reason before excommunicating him. The primary cause for excommunication was criminal or grossly immoral behavior. For about the first 300 years of its existence, Christianity remained an unofficial religion and was often persecuted. A number of political leaders eventually became converts, and under them, Christianity began to change. The Humanitarian Foundation created by Jesus eroded as Christianity became more political. The political transformation of Christianity got its first big push in the West Roman Empire with the Christian conversion of its ruler Constantine I the Great. A number of historians believe that Constantine was already leaning in the direction of becoming a Christian because his father was a monotheist. Contemporaries of Constantine have noted, however, that Constantine's true conversion came as a result of a reported vision he had in 312 AD. Several different accounts have been recorded of that vision, according to Socrates, who wrote about it in the 5th century AD. And he was marching at the head of his troops. A paternal vision transcending all description appeared to him. In fact, at about that time of the day, when the sun, having passed the meridian, began to decline toward the west, he saw a pillar of light in the form of a cross on which was inscribed, "In this conquer." Boom, bingo, zip, zam, zip, bingo, motherfucker. That right there, that moment right there, and to see Bramley tie that in with the custodial rulers, oh, that's key. Oh, that's really key. Key piece of info right there. Yes, in this sign conquer. That is the moment. That is the genesis. That is when religion was combined with the priest class and combined with genocide and murder and bloodshed and the Templars and of course the Crusades, on and on after that, and then into the modern day of what we have now. With those forefathers that originated from that are now in the Council for National Policy and now in the Jesuit order. You see how this has happened? That's why Blackwater's over there calling their Humvees and all that stuff the Templar 1 and the Templar 2 and all this stuff. It's unbelievable. That's a key moment in history right there, folks. We need to be paying attention to this. In this sign conquer. That's when you started to see the appearance of the cross. That is the meaning it took from that point on. And people who wear the crosses and whatnot, they wear them because they are agents of that original particular mindset. And it's the people in these bloodlines, these ones that were put in positions of power by the custodians to be the rulers of our earth, the ones that were the original priest class. These are the ones that executed every plan and have created history all around us. They've been there at every major event throughout history. And they were all over the assassination of Lincoln and also all over the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And guess what, Bubba? That's why I'm asking. That's why I've been asking everybody to support us these past few months so I could get this movie done the way I want it to be, because all that's going to be in the new film. We got fingerprints all over it. Man, reading this, tell you what. He saw, in the West, he saw a pillar of light in the form of a cross, and down in a pillar of light in the form of a cross. That's very interesting, because in the Dominican Republic, this is absolutely true. You can look this up. In the Dominican Republic, the Knights of Malta, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, paid for a building to be constructed down there. It's called the Pharaoh Acolin. Pharaoh Acolin. Pharaoh A-C-O-L-O-N. Pharaoh Acolin. It is a cross-shaped building with no windows. The Knights Templar, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta paid for it to be constructed there in the Dominican Republic. The locals talk about hearing screams and blood sacrifice being done inside. And at night, guess what it does? It emits a pillar of light into the sky in the form of a cross. And when I saw this thing, I was like, aliens built that thing. Aliens built that thing. That was, I don't know why, and I had no proof of that and still don't, but when I first saw that, the Pharaoh Acolin, my immediate thing was that was built by extraterrestrials. There's just no way it isn't. And so reading this now, it's sort of just unbelievable that, that especially when you think about the fact that, again, the Knights of Malta paid for this thing to be created. I mean, this thing is saying, I'm dropping some pictures into the chat room for you, for those of you who haven't ever seen this thing. It's just an unbelievable sight. So again, yeah, for that to be, yeah, wow. Let's continue on here. The pillar of light thing, yeah, that just got me. So he saw a pillar of light in the form of a cross on which was inscribed, "In this sign conquer." The appearance of the sign struck him with amazement, and doubting his own eyes, he asked those around him if they could see what he did. And as they unanimously declared that they could, the emperor's mind was strengthened by this divine and miraculous apparition. On the following night, while he slept, he saw Christ, who directed him to make a standard flag according to the pattern he had been shown, and to use it against his enemies as a guarantee of victory. Obedient to the divine command, he had a standard made in the form of a cross, which is preserved in the palace until this day, right there. The sign of Rome was put on the flag as a sign of conquering. And that's what it's been meant to do, to conquer the other bloodlines that were spread out throughout the planet, to conquer them so that only the white Anglo-Saxon, the whites that were put in positions of kingship, will rule the planet, and allowing them to do away with everybody else. This is where eugenics and the CMP and the white nationalists and all that stuff come into play. This is why, where some of, who knows the most about this Anunnaki stuff and all that? Who knows the most of that? Go look at like websites like Stormfront, the neo-Nazis. They know about this 7 Ways to Sunday. I've looked in their forums before. They know all about the Anunnaki. They know about all this stuff because they believe that that's what proves the whole idea of the Aryan race. They know all about this stuff, man. And then these guys will go on radio shows and, oh, yeah, I don't talk about that Anunnaki stuff. That's crap. Yeah, right. Knowing you know full well about it, you little white supremacist turds. Let's see where I left off here. The truth of Constantine's vision is disputed by those who would attribute it to mere legend making. Others might make the view of the aerial cross as an unusual reflection of the setting sun, followed by a dream. Some theorists might even argue that it was another manifestation of the UFO phenomenon with its continuing links to apocalyptic religion. Whatever the truth of the story is, Constantine's purported vision of a bright light in the sky, followed by the appearance of Jesus the next night, is stated to be the event which pushed Constantine into the arms of apocalyptic Christianity. He issued the famous Edict of Milan 1 year later. The edict officially granted tolerance to the Christian religion within the Roman Empire, ending the almost 3 centuries of Roman persecution. Constantine was responsible for other significant changes to Christianity. It was he who convened and often attended the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. At that time, many Christians, such as the Gnostics, strongly resisted efforts by Constantine and others to deify Jesus. The Gnostics simply saw Jesus as an honest spiritual teacher. The Nicene Council met in large part to put an end to such resistance and to create divine images of Jesus. With this purpose in mind, the council created the famous Nicene Creed, which made belief in Jesus as the Son of God a cornerstone of Christian faith. To enforce these often unpopular tenets, Constantine put the power of the state at the disposal of the newly Romanized Christian church. Constantine's reign was notable for another achievement. It marked the beginning of the European Middle Ages. Constantine is credited with laying the foundation for medieval serfdom and feudalism that they are reinitiating right now as we speak. As in the Hindu caste system, Constantine made most occupations hereditary. He decreed that the colony, a class of tenant fanners, were to be permanently attached to the soil on which they lived. Constantine Romanized Christianity. Yeah, somebody in my chat room the other day was saying, I think it was Eric, Electrophrenic, he was saying, oh yeah, Ted Turner, he may not be a bad guy after all. I saw him on TV the other day, and he has all these cattle farms and these horse farms. He owns all this land. Yeah, he owns an ungodly amount of land. He owns a stretch of land that starts at fucking the Mexico border and goes all the way up to Montana to the Canadian border. He said he bought all that so he could ride his horse from one border to the other and still be on his own land. Unbelievable, that guy. And so he was saying, oh, maybe he's not a bad guy after all. He's paying these farmers to, live on his land and take care of his horses and cattle and stuff. And I go, you understand that's feudalism, right? That's the definition of feudalism. That's the definition of serfdom. When you live on land that you don't own, yet you take care of it and raise it and everything else for somebody else's benefit, that's serfdom. And it goes back to, the purveyors of this modern world system. And his oppressive feudalism caused Christianity to move sharply away from the surviving maverick teachings of Jesus into a nearly complete custodial system. Exactly. When it got Romanized, when the Romans came in and took Christianity and turned it from a maverick renegade teaching that was for the people, they took Christianity, co-opted it, and turned it into this priest class custodial creation that we know of today. That's what modern day Christianity is. As time progressed and official changes to Christian doctrine continued to be made, 2 new crimes emerged: heresy, speaking out against established dogma, and paganism, not adhering to Christianity at all. Even though, that was prior to it ever being created, there was paganism, and it stole so many things from it. We don't want to talk about that. We'll talk about that more around Easter. In the earliest days of the church, Christian leaders felt that people could only be made Christians by appealing to their reason, and that no one could be or should be forced. After Constantine, leaders of the new Roman orthodoxies took an entirely different view. They demanded obedience as a matter of law and belief on the basis of faith alone rather than reason. With those changes came new punishments. No longer was excommunication the severest penalty of the church, although it was still practiced. Physical and economic sanctions were also applied. Many devoted Christians became victimized by the new laws when they would not agree to the new Roman orthodoxies. Those victims correctly saw that the church was moving away from Jesus' true teachings. The new Christian teachings were given a great boost at the end of the 4th century AD by East Roman Emperor Theodosius Theodius I. Theodius issued at least 18 laws aimed at punishing those people who rejected the doctrines established by the Nicene Council. He made Christianity the official state religion and closed down many pagan temples by force. He ordered Christian armies to burn down the famous Alexandrian Library, which was a world book depository and center of learning. The Alexandrian Library contained priceless historical, scientific, and literary records from all over the world, gathered over a period of 700 years. Although some of the library had already been ravaged by earlier wars, the destruction of Theodosius' army obliterated what remained. Because most of the documents were one of a kind, a great deal of recorded history and learning was lost. Matters continued to worsen. By the middle of the 6th century AD, the death penalty came to be used against heretics and pagans. A campaign of genocide was ordered by the East Roman Emperor Justinian to more quickly establish the Christian orthodoxies. In Byzantine alone, an estimated 100,000 people were murdered. Again, as soon as these Romans came in, as soon as they came in and took it over, this is what you started to see. You started to see it become the priest class that it is today. That got passed down, and these bastards started initiating bloodshed and genocide immediately. Immediately. And everybody out there that calls himself Christians, maybe even some of you out there in our listening audience, it just seemed to not understand that and get that, and understand that when those of us try to expose Christianity and what it is today, that this is why. Not that we're against the teachings of Jesus, not that we don't think that those teachings, even though it may be from a person that never existed, aren't good core teachings, some of them, and blah, blah, and this, that, and the other. We just don't know. We don't have all the information. I've said this for the longest time. I don't think we have enough information to say we should believe in Jesus or shouldn't believe in Jesus. Because honestly, we just don't have enough information. We don't know everything he believed. We don't know everything he taught. We haven't been given that. We just don't have all the information. So I think it's foolish to one way or the other say, I believe that this person is the Messiah. But you shouldn't believe in any messiahs anyway. You should believe that Jesus and God and all the energies in the universe are something that all of us are a part of. And there is no separation between any of us. You come across very few universal truths, but I believe that is one. Under Justinian, the hunting of heretics became a frequent activity, and the practice of burning heretics at the stake began. Justinian also introduced more changes to Christian doctrine. He convened the Second Synod of Constantinople in 553 AD, and the synod was neither attended nor apparently sanctioned by the Pope in Rome. At that time, in fact, many of the changes to Christian doctrine in the Eastern Roman Empire had not yet reached the papacy, although they eventually would. The Second Synod issued a decree banning the doctrine of past lifetimes or reincarnation, even though the doctrine was important. It was an important one to Jesus. There you go again. Bloodshed, restricting of knowledge, priest class, Rome. All roads, ladies and gentlemen, lead to Rome. All roads lead to Rome. There's another one for your anagram machine. Nerd out on that one for a while. Oh my God, I bet that's a laundry list. It's true, though. All roads lead to Rome. In all research, no matter what the topic is, no matter where it goes, no matter what it is, all roads always lead to Rome. All roads lead to Rome every time. Every time. That's why. Everything in our world that we can, that we even see as problems can be originated back to these events that we're talking about right here. Can you see that? It's true. It was all over for us once this stuff that we're talking about right now came in. If anyone assert the fabulous preexistence of souls and shall submit to the monstrous doctrine that follows from it, let him be excommunicated. In deference to that decree, all but very veiled references to pre-existence were taken out of the Bible. Belief in pre-existence was declared heresy. This suppression was enforced throughout the Western Christian world and in its sciences. The idea of personal preexistence still remains to a very large degree a Western religious and scientific heresy. Christianity was shaped into a powerful institution under the East Roman emperors. True to the pattern of history, Romanized Christianity was another brotherhood faction that could be counted on to do battle with other brotherhood factions, thereby helping to generate nonstop warfare between human beings. Another perfect way of putting it. The new Orthodox Christianity was placed in opposition to all other religions, including the East Roman mystery schools, which Justinian banned. We have just observed a snowballing of historical events triggered by Constantine's vision. This period marked one of mankind's end-of-the-world episodes, highlighted by religious visions, cataclysmic genocides, and the creation of a new world social order, promising but not delivering a utopia. Another important end-of-the-world element was also present. A massive plague struck, accompanied by reports of unusual aerial phenomenon. Between 540 AD and 592 AD, let me stop right there for a minute. By the way, a lot of people believe that what they're talking about there when this straight plague, because there was mass UFO sightings around the time of the Great Plague, and a lot of people believe that was genocide and that was depopulation programs being conducted by extraterrestrials because of the sights and unusual lights in the skies and stuff like that. It's very plausible. A lot of people believe that's what the chemtrails are. And why, even with certain zoom cameras, you can't always see a plane. You can just see a trail. It's true. Between 540 AD and 592 AD, when Justinian was carrying out his Christian reforms, a bubonic plague engulfed the East Roman Empire and spread to Europe. The epidemic began just inside Justinian's realm, and so it was named Justinian's Plague. Justinian's Plague was one of the most devastating plagues of history, and many people at the time believed it to be punishment from God. In fact, the word plague comes from the Latin word for blow or wound. Plague has been nicknamed God's disease, or a blow or a wound from God. One reason people thought plague to be from God was the frequent appearance of unusual aerial phenomena in conjunction with outbreaks of the plague. One chronicler, One chronicler of Justinian plagues was the famous historian Gregory of Tours, who documented a number of unusual events from the plague years. Gregory reports that just before Justinian's plague invaded the region of France in 567 AD, 3 or 4 brilliant lights appeared around the sun in the heavens and appeared to be on fire. This may have been a natural sundog effect. However, other unusual celestial phenomena were also seen in the area. Another historian reported a similar event 23 years later in another part of France, Avignon. Strange sights were reported in the city and around the ground, and was sometimes as brightly illuminated as the night as in the day. Shortly thereafter, a disastrous outbreak of the plague occurred here. Gregory reported a sighting in Rome consisting of an immense dragon which floated through the sky and down the city and down to the sea, followed by a severe outbreak of the plague immediately thereafter. Such reports chillingly suggest the unthinkable. That Justinian's plague was caused by biological warfare agents spread by custodial aircraft. It would be a repetition of similar plagues reported in the Bible and ancient Mesopotamian texts. By the time of Justinian's plagues, however, the custodians were invisible. That's when they took on the name of the Watchers. They were hidden behind brotherhood secrecy and veils of religious myth, yet they were apparently no less concerned about keeping their slave race oppressed. And they're, in my opinion, with the people that are in charge today, are the progenitors of that. We will see a great deal more evidence of UFO activity associated with plagues in the up-and-coming chapter on the Black Death. According to apocalyptic prophecy, an event like Justinian's plague is supposed to herald the coming of a new Messiah or a messenger from God. Sure enough, such a figure did arrive. His name was Muhammad. He was born during Justinian's reign at a time when the plague was still raging. Proclaimed in adulthood as the new savior, Muhammad became the leader of a new monotheistic apocalyptic religion, Islam. Like Moses and Jesus before him, Muhammad appears to have been a sincere man, but his new religion nevertheless became a faction which created new religious issues for people to endlessly fight over. Like Moses and Jesus, Muhammad was supported by the corrupted brotherhood. That's the end of chapter 14. The next chapter is entitled Muhammad. Chapter 15, Muhammad. Here from William Bramley's God's Meeting. Let's jump right into that tonight. Muhammad was born circa 570 AD. As with Jesus, there are gaping holes in the life history of Muhammad, especially in regard to his childhood and early adulthood. To fill in the gap, some historians hypothesize that Muhammad was an orphan who had been shunned about among relatives during his youth. It is known that at age 25, he married a wealthy widow, and some biographers believe that he worked as a tradesman in her business for the next 15 years, although that is not entirely certain. At age 40, Muhammad suddenly emerged as a religious prophet and the leader of a powerful new religious movement. According to Muhammad's own statements, his religious mission was triggered by an apparition. The vision occurred outside a secluded cave to which Muhammad would frequently retire for prayer and contemplation. The apparition was an angel bearing a message from Muhammad to spread. This was not just any angel, however. It called itself Gabriel, one of the most important of the Christian angels. Muhammad described the meeting in these words: "The Quran is no other than a revelation revealed to him. One terrible in power taught it to him, endued him with wisdom. With even balance stood he in the highest part of the horizon. Then he came nearer and approached and was at a distance of 2 bows in even closer. And he revealed to his servant what he revealed." The Quran repeats this story, that it is the word of an illustrious messenger endued with power, having influence with the Lord of the throne, obeyed there by angels, faithful to his trust, and your compatriot is not one possessed by jinn. And the jinn, J-I-N-N, are spirits. That's what they put inside. That's where genies come from. The jinn are the spirits that they put inside of the genie bottles. That's what those are. And that's what horrified me once I finally saw the footage. Because after years and years and years of talking about, the break-in to the Iraq National Museum after the invasion of Baghdad in 2003, where they stole all the ancient artifacts. Well, I tell you what, seeing that video from BBC, I mean, there's actual BBC footage, folks. I've seen it where they show them breaking into the vault, special forces, our troops. And when they break open the door and they go inside, there's just thousands of those genie bottles everywhere. And I started thinking, oh my God, did they go in there and let all these fucking spirits loose? It's crazy. Muhammad was either semi-conscious or in a trance when the angel Gabriel ordered him to recite and record his message that the angel was about to give him. The angel's command to Muhammad was much like the old commands given earlier in the history books to Ezekiel of the Old Testament and to John of the book of Revelation by similar custodial personnel. When Muhammad awoke, it seemed to him that the angel's words were inscribed upon his heart. This is significant, for it suggests that Muhammad, like Ezekiel, John, and perhaps even Constantine, had been drugged and mentally tampered with so that the message would be more firmly implanted in his mind. Trauma-based mind control. And, I've never really thought about it, but, if you, wow, that kind of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? That these messianic figures were, chosen by the custodians of the extraterrestrials or what have you, and then, possibly taken up into a ship and subjected to all sorts of trauma-based mind control experiments to which, then all of a sudden they become the harbingers and the sort of bringer-abouts of these religions that were created by these custodial masters. Wow. Never really thought about it like that, but that does make a lot of sense. And because, again, as in the macrocosm, so in the microcosm, as above, so below. I mean, where do you think where do you think our rulers learned where to do this at? That's why they're the progeny of these people. And we know that they are because of our knowledge of the bloodlines. And we see how crazy this is. This is why reading this book has been so important and is so important for us to do here on the radio show, because Again, it's all these little things that fill in the blanks for us. The message given to Muhammad was a new religion called Islam, which means surrender. Followers must surrender to God. Members of Muhammad's faith are therefore called Muslims, which comes from the word Muslim, one who submits. And Islam was one more custodial religion designed to instill abject obedience in humans. The supreme being of the Islam faith is named Allah. And it says, it's amazing. It says right there in the Quran that Allah comes from Sirius. I mean, it just straight up says it. They don't hide it or anything. Right there in the Quran, folks, it says Allah comes from Sirius. I mean, my God. What more do you need? The supreme being of the Islam faith is named Allah, who was said by Muhammad to be the same God as the Jewish and Christian Jehovah. Two key themes of the Quran are its day of judgment prophecy and its fire and brimstone depiction of hell. Muhammad honored Moses and Jesus as Allah's two previous messengers and proclaimed Islam to be the third and final revelation from God. It was therefore the duty of all Jews and Christians to convert to Islam. Hebrews and Christians tended to be less than cooperative with Muhammad's demand. After all, they had been warned in their own apocalyptic writings about the dangers of false prophets. Again, pitting us against each other. Divide and conquer. They've been doing this since the beginning of time, and they're still doing it right now today with, new names for the operation. Now they call it, teabaggers, or now they call it the truth movement, whatever have you. The result has been one of the bloodiest fighting in world history. And again, that's proven. That's the importance of the CMP information right there. Tracing it back to the priest class, back to the Jesuit order, because it traces it back to these same very people. Like so many custodial religions before it, Islam did not allow people the luxury of choosing whether or not to become adherents. Muhammad embarked on a program of conquest to make it clear which way the choice was to go. Using the tactics of a General Emoso, the divinely inspired Muhammad raised an army and set off to convert unfaithful ones, infidels, to his faith. Muhammad's apocalyptic army cut a wide, bloody swath through most of the Middle East, including important Christian centers. The militant Muslim empire eventually stretched as far as east as India, where elements of Islam were incorporated into the Hindu religion. Untold lives were lost during the Islamic conquest because the Islamic armies were prone to commit fearsome genocides as a part of their mission to bring utopia to mankind. To most infidel Christians, Muslims were nothing more than savage heathens, non-believers. This set up an inevitable conflict into which millions of people would be dragged. 500 years after the death of Muhammad, the Christian world launched a coordinated military effort to force the Muslims out of the Holy Land. That effort is known as the Crusades, and as you know, the Crusades 2.0 are going on right now as we speak. The Christian Crusades to free Palestine for the Muslims took place between 1099 and 1270 AD. Skirmishes and minor battles between Christians and Muslims had broken out before, but it was a call to arms by Pope Urban II in 1095 that finally turned those skirmishes into organized war, involving nearly every Christian ruler of Europe. Hundreds of thousands of Christians enlisted in the Crusades after being promised religious blessings, fiefdoms, and spoils of conquest. Volunteers came from nearly every social class. For many serfs and peasants, the papal call to arms represented a way to escape feudal lords and perhaps to return as wealthy heroes. I mean, that's a fascinating statement, isn't it? Because doesn't that kind of sound similar to the people who are calling for armed conflict and the people who are calling for violent revolution and these phony revolutions being perpetrated by the Patriot Movement, Truth Movement, that kind of thing? Let me read that again. Volunteers came from nearly every social class. For many serfs and peasants, the papal call to arms represented a way to escape feudal lords and perhaps to return as wealthy heroes. Again, you see how this is being perpetrated yet again in just a different way with a different name and a different face today. The Crusades got off to a good but bloody start. The Christians captured Jerusalem in the summer of 1099, and although the knights and peasants who marched under Christian banners were extolled to practice high virtues and chivalry, they frequently degenerated into butchery and other acts of viciousness. When the Crusaders took Jerusalem in 1099, they murdered many of the non-Christian survivors in a slaughter that claimed the lives of more than 10,000 victims. Not only were the Crusaders killing Muslims, they were also killing Jews who were considered by many Christians to be as heathen as the Muslims. The slaughter of Jews began even before the First Crusade to the Holy Land in that year of 1095. Christian factions started murdering Jews in Europe. A genocidal wave in the German Rhineland was the first major episode. It was sparked by unsubstantiated rumors that Rhineland Jews were using Christian children in their religious sacrifices. Obliterating the Jews became an important element of the Crusades, and the massacres continued even after the Crusades to Jerusalem had ended. The Crusades had another important effect on Europe. Several decades before the launching of the First Crusade, Pope Gregory VII had attempted to put the Roman Catholic Church under greater centralized control. Prior to Gregory's effort, the Catholic Church in Europe was a loosely knit organization run primarily by non-clergymen, the type of organization envisioned by Christianity's earliest founders. After Pope Urban II ascended to the papacy and rallied all good Christians to fight the unholy Muslims, Christian princes and supporters began pledging allegiance directly to the Pope, thereby hastening the centralization effort to the Pope, which was attempted earlier by Pope Gregory VII. The power of the Roman papacy increased. As the holy wars dragged on, growing numbers of people proclaimed their papal loyalty. Behind the Crusades lay the Brotherhood. Absolutely. The Christian Crusaders were led primarily by two powerful knight organizations with intimate brotherhood ties: the Knights Hospitaller and the Knights of the Temple. The Knights Templar. Oh, no, I'm not a Knight of Malta. I'm a Knights Hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Lynn Horowitz, you dumbass. Like we wouldn't figure out it's the same goddamn thing. Yeah, I'm not a Knight of Malta. I'm a Knights of St. John of Hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem, by God. Like, yeah, that's me. Phony assholes. You guys are so done. You know, at what point do we declare we officially stick a fork in you? Because I'm ready to eat, and you guys are done. The Knights Hospitaller were so named because they operated a hospital in Jerusalem to help pilgrims in distress. The Hospitallers began operations in the year 1048 as a charitable order. Their purpose was aid and comfort. When the First Crusaders successfully captured the holy city, the Hospitallers began to receive generous financial support from the wealthy Crusaders. In the year 1118, 70 years after their founding, the Knights Hospitaller underwent a change of leadership and purpose. They were made into a military order dedicated to fighting the Muslims who were continually trying to recapture Jerusalem. With a change of purpose came a change in name. The Hospitallers were variously called the Order of Knights Hospitaller of St. John, the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem, or simply the Knights of St. John. The Hospitallers had named themselves after John, son of the king of Cyprus. John had gone to Jerusalem to aid Christian pilgrims and knights. There is some doubt as to whether the Hospitallers were founded as a brotherhood organization. They reportedly did not function as one at the outset. However, they soon became affiliated with the Brotherhood network by adopting Brotherhood traditions and titles. They became ruled by a Grand Master and developed secret rites and rituals. By 1119, 1 year after the Hospitallers had become a fighting order, the Templar Knights were in existence. The Templars originally called themselves the Order of the Poor Knights of Christ because they took solemn vows of poverty. Their name was later changed to the Knights of the Temple. After they were housed near the site where Solomon's Temple had once stood, although the Templars and Hospitallers had a common enemy in the Muslims, the two Christian organizations became bitter rivals. The Templar Knights began their existence as a branch of the Brotherhood. They practiced a deep mystical tradition and used many Brotherhood titles, notably Grand Master. Like the Hospitaller Knights and Templars, the Templars received a large sum of money from well-to-do Christian crusaders. The Templars thereby became enormously wealthy and were able to transform themselves into an international banking house during the 12th and 13th centuries. The Templars loaned large sums of money to European kings, princes, merchants, and to at least one Muslim leader. Most of the Templars' riches were stored in strong rooms in their Paris and London temples, causing those cities to become leading financial centers. After the fall of Jerusalem and the final victory of the Muslims in 1291, the fortunes of both knightly orders changed. The Knights of St. John were forced to flee the Holy Land. They took up residence on a succession of islands during the ensuing centuries. With the changes of location came changes in names. They became the Knights of Rhodes after moving to the island of Rhodes. That's, of course, a bloodline, like the Cecil Rhodes Round Tables. They were the Knights of Malta when they moved to that island and ruled it. So right there, that's the key piece of info everybody wondered. Now Glenn Horowitz says, I'm not a Knight of Malta. I'm a Knight of St. John of Jerusalem. So right there is that little piece of evidence everybody's been waiting for. And you just heard it. The Knights of St. John, the Hospitallers, moved to the little island of Malta, and that's when they became the Knights of Malta. So again, one more nail in the coffin there of Dr. Lynn Horowitz and his, I'm not a Knight of Malta, I'm a Knight of St. John of Jerusalem. Ha, 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 ha. Yep, that's me. Yeah, nice try, asshat. You're busted. You're done. Next. While in Malta, the Knights became a major military and naval power in the Mediterranean until their defeat in 1789 by Napoleon. After enjoying temporary protection under Russian Emperor Paul I, the Knights of Malta had their headquarters moved to Rome in 1834 by Pope Leo VIII. Today, they are known as the Sovereign and Military Order of Malta, the SMOM. And they have the unusual distinction of being the world's smallest nation. Located in a walled enclave in central Rome, Sovereign Military Order of Malta still retains its status as a sovereign state. Although new Grand Masters of the Order must be approved by the Pope, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta runs hospitals, clinics, and leper colonies throughout the world, and it also gives active assistance to anti-communist causes and is surprisingly influential in political, business, and intelligence circles today, despite its small size. And you see, you read something like that and you figure out why this book has been largely ignored by the Truth Patriot community. I mean, really, because it's all in here. And it all, again, I've said this before since we've been reading this, and I got to say it again. This explains to me 100% for years why Alex Jones and others have always told us, no, don't look into that. That's a distraction. Focus on the bankers and focus on Ron Paul and all this over here in the Constitution, but don't look into this information. Don't look into the extraterrestrial stuff. Don't look into that. Well, this is why. Because it's intimately connected to the people whose asses he's covering. It's just it's all right there, and if you ignore it anymore, you're with them. But you're covering their ass too. The Templar Knights did not fare as well as the Hospitallers after their Crusades. They were forced to flee with the Hospitallers to the island of Cyprus, whereupon the Templars split up and returned to their many Templar houses in Europe. The Templars came under heavy criticism for their failure to save the Holy Land, and rumors circulated that they engaged in heresy and immorality. Accusations were made that the Templars spat on the cross during their initiations and forced members to engage in homosexual acts. By 1307, the Templar controversy had become so strong that Philip IV, the Fair of France, ordered the arrest of all Templars within his dominion and used torture to extract confessions. 5 years later, the Pope dissolved the Templar order by papal decree. Many Templars were executed, including Grand Master Jacques de Molay, who was publicly burned at the stake on March 11th, 311, 1314, in front of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. Nearly all Templar properties were confiscated and turned over to the Hospitaller Knights. The long and intense rivalry between the Hospitallers and the Templars had finally come to an end. The Hospitallers emerged as the victors. Their victory could not have occurred at a more fortuitous time, for there had been serious discussion within papal circles about merging the two orders, a plan which would have been completely unacceptable to both. Despite the downfall of the Templar Knights, the organization managed to survive. According to Freemasonic historian Albert Mackey, the Knights Templar were given a home in Portugal by King Denis after their banishment for the rest of the Catholic Empire. In Portugal, the Templars were granted their usual rights and privileges. They wore the same costumes and they were governed by the same rules they had before. The decree which reestablished the Templars in Portugal stated that they were in that country to be rehabilitated. Pope Clement V approved the rehabilitation plan and issued a bull, an official proclamation commanding that the Templars change their name to the Knights of Christ. The Templars, or the Knights of Christ, also changed the cross on their uniform from the 8-pointed Maltese cross to the official Latin cross. The Templars became quite powerful in their new home. In 1420, King John I gave the Knights of Christ control of the Portuguese possessions in the Indies. Subsequent Portuguese monarchs expanded the Knights' proprietorship to any new countries which with the Knight might discover. The Knights of Christ became so powerful, reports Albert Mackey, that several Portuguese kings felt compelled to curtail the Knights' influence by taking over the Grand Master position. The Knights of Christ survived under Portuguese sponsorship until well into the 18th century, at which time the Templars reemerged and took on a renewed importance in the stormy political affairs of Europe, as we shall see later. There was a third Christian Knight organization during the Crusades worth mentioning, the Teutonic Knights. The Teutonic Knights were originally called the Order of the Knights of the Hospital of St. Mary of the Teutons in Jerusalem. Well, yeah, obviously you'd want to shorten that down. God damn. Seriously, those people didn't know how to make anything short back then, did they? The Order of the Knights of the Hospital of St. Mary of the Teutons in Jerusalem. The Order of the Knights of the Hospital of St. Mary of the Teutons in Jerusalem. Boy, I'd be interested to see what our friend who's been doing all the anagrams would have to do about that one. Like the Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights started as a charitable order. They operated a hospital in Jerusalem to aid Christians making pilgrimages to the Holy Land. In March 1198, the Teutonic Knights were given the rank of an order of knights, which made them into a fighting order. Like the Templars, the Teutonic Knights lived a semi-monastic lifestyle, practicing initiation rites, and were ruled by a Grand Master. The Teutonic Knights permitted only Teutons, Germans, to become members. They also feuded a great deal with the Hospitallers and Templars. During the Crusades, when Brotherhood military organizations were valiantly leading Christian armies to fight the Muslims, other groups in the Brotherhood network were rallying Muslims to battle the Christians. Of the several Brotherhood branches promoting the cause of Islam, one is of particular interest to us, the sect of Assassins. Muhammad died in 632 AD. A struggle immediately ensued over who was to become his successor. This caused the Islamic religion to break apart into compelling sects, each having its own ideas about who was to succeed Muhammad. One such Islamic faction was Shia, which adhered to a strong into-the-world tradition. Shiites believed in the millennium, a day of judgment followed by 1,000 years of peace and a spiritual salvation. Eventually, the Shia sect itself split apart. One faction to emerge from the Shia split was the Ismaili sect, which gave birth to the Assassins. The Ismailians broke away from the other Shiites in the 8th century. The Ismaili sect was a Brotherhood secret society with a lodge system similar to Freemasonry and to other Brotherhood organizations. The Ismaili Grand Lodge was situated in Cairo, where it practiced step-by-step initiations with all of the attendant symbols and mysteries. Led by a Grand Master, the Ismailians promulgated a very strong apocalyptic message, complete with the promise of a coming Messiah. One Ismaili Lodge member was a man named Hassan I Sabah, Mr. Sabah's mystical conversion came about as a result of a severe and dangerous illness during which he believed that God had purged him and given him a spiritual rebirth. In 1078, at the Grand Lodge in Cairo, Mr. Sabah asked the Ismaili Caliph for permission to spread the Ismaili gospel in Persia. The Caliph granted Mr. Sabah's request on the condition that Sabah agreed to support the Caliph's eldest son, Nizar, as the next Caliph. Sabah accepted the deal and named his new Ismaili branch the Nizaris, after the Caliph's son. It was not long, however, before Mr. Sabah's branch became known by its more famous name, the Assassins. The Assassins are usually referred to as a religious sect. They were more accurately a secret society. According to Masonic historian Albert Mackey, the Assassins adopted the organizational structure of the Ismailians. The Assassins practiced step-by-step initiations and possessed a secret mystical doctrine. Mr. Mackey adds that the Assassins appear to have practiced 3 of the very same fraternal degrees used in Freemasonry today: apprentice, fellow, and master. Right, well, that goes, yeah, well, of course, because that goes back to the Babylonian mystery religions, Mr. Bramley. The Assassins had a religious code similar to the Hospitaller and Teutonic Knights. Now, this goes way, way, way back. That idea of it's the Trinity. Again, it's Osiris, Isis, Horus. It's the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. It's the Trinity. That goes back way, way, way back. It's almost always been there. So it didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's not just some sort of weird coincidence that the Assassins would have used that same thing. Because, again, if they were a Brotherhood organization, then that means that they would follow what the Brotherhood had always done. And the Brotherhood had always had that sort of that trinity of adept, student, and master, or apprentice, fellow, and master. And, of course, that's often depicted inside of Masonic lodges. In fact, there's up in Guthrie, Oklahoma, they have the largest Freemasonic cathedral in the world. And inside they have these 3 stained glass windows. I have pictures of them, actually, because I went up there. And they're priceless. The insurance company won't even insure them, and that's what they depict. They depict the apprentice, the fellow, and the master. Fascinating paintings done on stained glass. They're one of a kind. There's no other ones like them in the world, and they're absolutely priceless works of art. They're absolutely amazing too. A distinguishing feature of the assassin organization was its use of drugs, primarily hashish. Yeah, this is. Yeah, this is what Michael Tessarin refers to as bong-smoking Shiva worshippers. Oh, man. I almost spit Fruit Loops all over the fucking computer screen the first time I heard his ass say that shit. That was so funny. Sorry, he fucking cracks me up, man. He's too funny. Bong-smoking Shiva worshippers. That's fucking greatness. Primarily hashish for mystical and other purposes. In fact, the word assassin comes from the word hashishian, which means users of hashish. Well, obviously, hi, I'm a hashishian. Are you a hashishian? All right. Well, I'm a hashishian, hot hashishian male. Seeks female hashishian to lay down by the fire and read occult manuscripts with. Yes. Hashishian. We got to bring that back. The Assassins and several other Brotherhood groups in history extol the virtues of mind-altering pharmaceuticals as a way to achieve mystical enlightenment. Well, these guys don't sound half bad. The Assassins were also a fighting organization with an army. Grandmaster Sabah chose a fortress located high in the northern mountains of Iran for the headquarters of his new group. The Assassin fortress was known as Alamut, which means eagle's teaching or the eagle's nest. The Assassins became a formidable military and political power in the region and eventually controlled other fortresses in Persia and Syria. The Assassins feuded with other Muslim organizations and fought against the Knights Templar and other Christian armies during the Crusades. To help win its feuds and wars, the Assassins developed the deadly tool for which they became famous and feared. The tool of the lone assassin. Yeah, the lone motherfucking gunman, fool. Most people today are painfully aware of the phenomenon of the so-called lone assassin. This is usually a young man in his 20s or 30s who is driven by crazed delusions and who displays little or no concern for his or her own safety as he murders an important leader in broad daylight in public and in front of witnesses. The killing has tremendous shock value, and it can greatly affect the political direction of a nation. See, they've been doing this forever. Many people believe that so-called lone assassins are products of our modern age. It is quite amusing to read ponderous psychiatric tomes to that effect. In truth, the lone assassin has been a political institution for over 700 years, if not longer. Now, I got to give it up. Give it up. Come on, give it up. Give it up. Give it up for Bramley right there. That's good work. That's good work, because that's absolutely true. And oftentimes people, especially in conspiratorial or, Jim Mars didn't point that out in Crossfire. You know what I mean? I got to give him points on that. That's an excellent point. Excellent point. I'm glad he put that in there and said that the way that he did, because, how come other researchers, when they're talking about Kennedy and lone assassins and Patsies and Oswalds, how come they never bring that up? The lone assassin has been a political institution for over 700 years, if not longer. Amen to that. 700 years ago, however, no pretense was made that the lone assassins acted alone as is done today. Back then, the lone assassin was known to be an effective and terrifying tool of political and social control. It was a technique used by the assassin organization to win its wars, increase its political influence, destroy its enemies, and enlarge its coffers by extortion. How did the assassin sect get young men to commit the murders? It is not easy to make people kill each other, especially when the murderer is likely to be caught and slain himself. The assassin organization had an effective method for overcoming this natural resistance and programming young men to kill. One of the earliest people to describe the assassin programming technique was Marco Polo, the famous European traveler of the 13th century who wrote a best-selling book about his journeys. Although Mr. Polo was accused by a few people in his own time of fabricating stories, subsequent investigation has verified nearly everything he described in his famous book. According to Mr. Polo, a portion of the assassin fortress in Alamut had been converted into a beautiful secret garden fashioned after the paradise described in Muhammad's visions of heaven. The garden grew almost every imaginable type of fruit and was watered with streams of wine, milk, and honey. The palaces were beautifully ornamented and had a company of singers, dancers, and musicians. If certain young men in the region showed promise as potential murderers, they were drugged, usually with opium or hashish, probably both, and taken to the secret garden. They were pampered for a few days, and nothing was denied them, including women. They were then drugged again and returned to their homes. Well, that doesn't sound half bad. They give you a bunch of drugs. They take you over with a bunch of bitches. They give you more drugs, and they take you home. Well, great. Where do we sign up? Oh, by the way, it kind of sounds like what they did to the 9/11 hijackers, doesn't it? Really, seriously. I'm not even trying to be funny. I mean, think about it. I mean, they tell us that these guys were out, at titty clubs the night before. They're flying airplanes and they're just leaving Qurans laying around titty bars and shit. Maybe that's, Before you get to 1,000 virgins, you must go to titty bar. And you must leave the Quran lying in the titty bar. Or no, otherwise Allah will not be happy with you. The young men believed that the assassin leaders had transported them to heaven and back. Eager to return, the young men would gladly follow instructions of their assassin leaders. The heaven-struck underlings were often told that a return to paradise lay in boldly assassinating a targeted enemy leader. The young assassin was instructed to wait in a public place and strike down the victim with a dagger as the victim passed by. Because the young assassins would often be killed on the spot or later be executed, they were made to believe that their death at the scene of the crime or by later execution will result in a return to the paradise they remembered. The notoriety of the assassins spread. It was rumored that some European kings were paying tribute to the assassins to avoid becoming targets. Although the extent of the assassin activity in Europe is still debated today, Some historians assert that the assassins focused most of their deadly practices on the conflicts going on in the Middle East. The assassins became famous far and wide as a result, and all people who attempt the murder of a political leader have come to be known as assassins or users of hashish. Although most modern assassins have not been hashish users, many have shown evidence of considerable mental tampering, which will be discussed near the end of this book. By the end of the 13th century, the Mongols had overrun the Middle East and had destroyed major assassin strongholds. Interestingly, the Mongols were also inspired by mystical beliefs. The assassins managed to survive the onslaught, and they exist today. Modern assassin sects are reported to be peaceably settled in India, Iran, and Syria. Their titular head is Aga Khan, who is the spiritual leader of all Ismailians worldwide. The Ismailians were estimated to number at about 20 million people as of today. As of 1840, the Aga Khans had been operating out of India because of an unsuccessful rebellion in 1838 of Aga Khan I against the Persian Shah. When the rebellion failed, Britain offered sanctuary to the Aga Khan in India, which was then under British rule. Since then, the Aga Khans have been traveling in elite circles of Western society. Recent Aga Khans have received educations at Oxford, Harvard, and in Switzerland. The Aga Khans have also gained a place in the international banking community through their establishment of a central bank in Damascus, Lebanon. That is unbelievable stuff. Whew. That's who the fuck these guys are. You know, like they are telling us that. I mean, I don't hear Jonesy talking about that. Folks, these assassins, let me tell you something. The bankers are assassins, folks. Okay? These people are offshore. They're offshore assassins, folks. Folks, I don't know what to do. You're going to have to call Ted, and he's going to shit out a gold deal for you today. It's going to be brilliant. I'm telling you what. I mean, really, though, my goodness, that's kind of an important piece of information. My goodness. I mean, again, it just proves these custodial bastards are the ones that set up the banks, they set up the religions, they set up everything. Use all these proxies to do it. Set up little dummy corporations. It may be a coincidence that lone assassins arose as an important phenomenon in the United States just about the time that Aga Khan I was establishing a relationship with the British in the early 19th century. The first known lone assassin to strike a U.S. president did so in 1835. The intended victim was Andrew Jackson, who was, interestingly, a member of a Knights Templar organization in America. Since then, U.S. presidents have been the targets of lone assassins every 10 to 20 years. Many other Western leaders and public figures have also been victims, although I have seen no evidence that the assassin sect itself is behind modern lone assassin episodes. It is clear that their technique has been picked up and used by influential political sources within Brotherhood connections in the Western world, as I shall discuss more fully in a later chapter. As we have seen, the Crusade era witnessed the birth of institutions which still affect us today. To the list, we can add two famous Christian orders, the Franciscans and the Dominicans. The Franciscans adopted the cord at the lion's outfit and the bald spot used by ancient Egyptian Brotherhood priests at El Amarara. The Franciscans appeared to be quite humane. The Dominicans, on the other hand, were placed in charge of the most widely hated byproduct of the Crusades, the Catholic Inquisition. The medieval Inquisition has been universally condemned as one of the most oppressive human institutions ever developed. It was known for its tortures and zealous excesses. The Inquisition arose out of an effort by Pope Innocent II to stamp out a large heretical sect in the south of France known as the Albigensians. Innocent II had called for a special crusade in 1208 to enter France and wipe out the sect. The 5-year war which ensued devastated the region. 10 years later, a new pope, Gregory IV, continued the action, and he placed the Dominicans in charge of investigating the Albigensians. Gregory gave the Dominican order full legal power to name and condemn all surviving heretics. Out of this campaign grew the full inhuman machinery of the Catholic Inquisition, which sought to stamp out heresy of every type. The Inquisition generated a fearful climate of intellectual and spiritual oppression in Europe. You know, it just dawned on me. I bet William Bramley's a Freemason. It makes no difference. I mean, I'll still have him on either way. I don't think I'll ask him if he's a Freemason, but man, I wouldn't change what I really wouldn't change what I think about it. I wonder if he is, though. Some of this stuff I'm reading, when I'm reading this, I'm going, man, because he's definitely not one of these, you know, priest class Jesuit, you know, typical conspiracy bozos. He's definitely not, because man, the stuff that he's talking about in this is way off the plantation, you know, getting into naming the stuff that, I mean, this, wow. And again, you know, I think it's why a lot of the stuff has been relegated to this fringe, because I mean, it really does sort of peel the onion back on who's really in control and how far it goes back, doesn't it? The Inquisition generated a fearful climate of intellectual and spiritual oppression in Europe for the next 600 years. Hearsay, innuendo, and honest intellectual disagreement led many decent people to the torture rack and also death by burning. The social scars are still visible today in the instinctive fear so many people have of expressing non-conforming ideas. The Inquisition helped breed a social reaction of violence to non-conforming ideas that the world has not yet fully escaped. It is clear that the Christian church has undergone many changes by the time the Crusades ended. The church was no longer the humanitarian, decentralized religion envisioned by Jesus. The new Catholic Church, headquartered in Rome, had succumbed to the reforms of the East Roman emperors. It was a religion Jesus would have deplored. Fortunately, after the demise of the Inquisition, the Catholic Church began to improve, and it has many good qualities today. Well, maybe I'll take back what I said about Bramley. Maybe he is a priest class post. Oh, no. Oh, I don't know. Who knows? Well, we're going to have him on, and it should be a good show nonetheless. That's just a staggering statement. I mean, maybe that's a joke. I mean, that's a staggering. I mean, this guy just went on a fucking 18-page tirade, just taking a knife and just gutting the Catholics, I mean, right up the middle. And then he puts the motherfucking cherry and nuts on top of it and says the Catholic Church began to improve and it has many good qualities today. That's gotta be, that's gotta be a bit, it's just blowing smoke, right? I mean, seriously. It has good qualities today. Maybe I will ask him about that. Yeah, Mr. Bramley, in your book, you said that Catholic Church has many good qualities. I'd like to know, what I'd like for you to name for us in my audience right now what those good qualities are, and I'd like to have a discussion about that. I think that's a pertinent question. How about you? Perhaps the most significant event of the Crusades does not involve the waging of war, the programming of assassins, or the creation of an inquisition. It entails the making of a peace. In the year 1228, German Emperor Frederick II led a crusade to Jerusalem. Frederick was not in good graces with the Pope at the time, and Frederick has been described as a strange, secular-minded, highly educated prince, a sworn enemy of the papacy on political grounds, who had acquired by marriage the title of what was left of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Frederick's fight with Pope Gregory had begun only 1 year before his trip to Jerusalem. The conflict between Frederick and Pope Gregory centered about the issue of centralized papal power. Frederick opposed it, and Gregory was striving to hasten it. This dispute caused Frederick to be put under sentence of excommunication, a sentence finally carried out in 1245. While under the sentence, but not yet excommunicated, the unrepentant Frederick journeyed to his kingdom in Jerusalem at the head of his own crusade. Despite a deep involvement with the Teutonic Knights, Frederick II proved on that trip that he could be a man of peace. Instead of prolonging war with the Muslims, Frederick negotiated a peace treaty. He apparently felt that it was in everyone's best interest to end the religious strife, and that is precisely what he did. Frederick accomplished this feat by negotiating with the reigning Muslim leader, Sultan Kamil. Within a year of starting his talks with the Sultan and without the approval of the Pope, Frederick concluded a treaty signed in 1229 that gave Jerusalem back to the Christians for 10 years, provided that the Christians did not arm themselves. The arrangement worked. Using negotiation and appeals to reason, Frederick had accomplished in one short trip what the popes had claimed they were trying to do for almost 130 years with warfare and blood. Under Frederick's treaty, Christians were free to inhabit Jerusalem and make pilgrimages there, and the Muslims were freed from the threat posed by the Christian armies. Many Christian and Muslim leaders were not at all happy with this agreement, however, for Frederick had set it up, leaving both parties indignant at so peaceful a settlement. When the truce finally ran out in 1239, the Holy War was resumed. We might legitimately ask, why was Frederick's treaty not extended or a similar one negotiated? What purpose was served by diving into 70 additional years of bloody warfare? The Christians wound up losing the Holy Land altogether. So often we hear that wars are a product of basic human nature, yet in one peace effort, we saw 130 years of raging conflict end through the effort of one man appealing to the reason and cooperation of another man, resulting in peace for the duration of the treaty. See, that is a clear-cut case. That's a perfect example of why they use divide and conquer, why they use phony left-right paradigm, why they use race, color, sexual orientation, whatever have you, to divide us. Because that situation described right there proves that human beings, mankind, left to our own devices, left untampered, left without a hierarchy, left without religion, control, any of this stuff, can come together and live together in peace. It proves that. It completely dispels that myth that, as he stated here, that, you know, oh, we're just basically built to suffer. You know, like it says in the Matrix. You know, the first Matrix we built was a utopia, and the second one we built because we discovered that human beings love suffering. That's a falsehood. That's a lie. They want us to believe that. The power structure, the hierarchy, the priest class, the government, call them what you will. They are the ones that drive wedges between us. They are the ones that try to get us in holy wars and uprisings and revolutions and all. You understand, revolutions don't happen with man killing man. That's not a revolution. Anybody that ever tries to tell you that a revolution is man killing man is working for these sons of bitches. They need us to kill each other so they don't have to do it. They need us divided. This is more proof, more than ever, that we need to come together as a people. We can exist. We can do it. The only thing standing in our way is them. And all we have to do is stand together as a people and say, look, we don't need you anymore. We're throwing you motherfuckers out. Get out of here. The people have taken over. It can be done, but they lie to us and tell us that no. We're all the problem. We need to kill each other. I mean, it's just no question. The whole idea now of who's really in charge of what we deem the New World Order or the planet or everything else, there's just no question. We have been ruled over by people who lied and said they were gods. And said they were gods only because they had advanced technology. And we are lining up to do the same thing all over again. Can't you see it? We already are in many ways. We see that the ability of people to have peace is as strong, if not stronger, than a desire for war. What then drove Muslims and Christians to slaughter one another over a trivial bit of dry real estate? One answer to this question may be found in what the Muslims and Christians thought they were ultimately fighting for: their spiritual knowledge, their spiritual salvation, and freedom. They believed that by fighting and perhaps even dying gloriously for their faith, they were guaranteed eternal salvation. History has clearly demonstrated that the drive for spiritual freedom is so strong that it can override any human drive, including the urge for physical self-preservation. At some point, People will sacrifice their own physical existences and even the physical survival of loved ones if they believe that the sacrifice will ensure their spiritual integrity or that it will bring about their spiritual salvation. When genuine spiritual knowledge is distorted, yet the desire for spiritual salvation continues to be stimulated, a great many people can be led into doing a great many stupid things. One important step to solving the problem of war, then, is to achieve a true understanding of the spirit and an actual way to its rehabilitation. When we look at the spiritual practices of the Christian Knights and the Muslim Ismailians, we discover that participation in warfare was often exalted as a spiritual quest. Warriors on both sides were inspired by corrupted brotherhood mysticisms, which taught that spiritual rewards could be earned by engaging in military endeavors against fellow human beings. This was the mythology of the spiritually noble war in which gallant soldiers were promised eternal salvation and a place in heaven for fighting a noble cause. Let me get a drink here. This mythology still remains vital today for recruiting people to participate in continued warfare. It twists the urge for spiritual freedom into an honoring of war. What is war then, if not a noble quest? Analyzed down to its most basic components, warfare is nothing more than the act of causing solid objects to destructively collide with other solid objects. That might sometimes be fun, but there is not much spiritual benefit to be derived from constantly engaging in it. Although it is true that war has many elements of a game, the destructive nature of war causes it to be little more than a series of criminal acts, primarily arson, battery, and murder. This reveals something of great significance. War is the institutionalization of criminality. Let me say that for you one more again. War is the institutionalization of criminality. War can never bring about spiritual improvement because criminality is one of the main causes of mental and spiritual deterioration. Societies which exalt criminal actions as a noble quest will suffer a rapid deterioration in the mental and spiritual condition of their inhabitants. Yeah. America, are you listening? Let me give that one to you one more again. Societies which exalt criminal actions as a noble quest will suffer a rapid deterioration in the mental and spiritual condition of their inhabitants. My God, look at our fucking country since 9/11. Since the war in Iraq, since Afghanistan. Look at the mental deterioration going on because of these phony fucking puppet leaders that believe they're on a crusade. I mean, Bush called it the crusade. It's going to take time for us to turn this from order into chaos. Chaos out of order, but we will. It's a crusade. Spiritual doctrines which exalt combat are doctrines which degrade the human race. It is not warfare in pursuit of a just cause a good thing. The biggest problem with using violent force to fight for a cause is that the rules of force operate on completely different principles than do the principles of right and wrong. The victorious use of violent force depends upon skills that have nothing to do with whether or not one's cause is a just one. The man who can draw his six-shooter the fastest is not necessarily the man with the best ideas. We, like our heroes, when they can outshoot or physically overpower the bad guys, and there is nothing wrong with their being able to do so, but not all of our heroes can. Those who have a legitimate cause should therefore be wary of the temptation to assert the rightness of their beliefs in the arena of violent force, since their cause may undeservedly lose. There are many effective methods to promote good causes and make them win, but those methods are seldom used in a world educated to use violence as the ultimate court of appeal. The Crusades and other religious conflicts have often been fueled by the issue of who is a true Messiah and who is not. Passions can run strong on this topic. It therefore behooves us at this time to discuss what a Messiah might or might not be. Chapter 16, Messiahs and Means. In a global civilization such as ours, where spiritual knowledge and freedom appear to have been tampered with, there would obviously be a place for someone to develop a useful and understandable body of knowledge about the spirit and the spirit's relationship to the universe. Because verifiable spiritual phenomena seem to be consistent from person to person from time to time, it is probable that all spiritual realities are rooted in consistent laws and axioms, just like astronomy or physics. If someone were to discover and methodically outline those laws and axioms, he or she would be doing a great service. Such discoveries could open up a whole new science. Would a person who did this be a Messiah? Promises of a Messiah have been put forth by a great many religions, both maverick and custodial. The word Messiah has had several teachings. From simply teacher to liberator, a Messiah could be anyone from a person who develops a successful science of the spirit to someone who is actually able to spiritually liberate the human race. Throughout history, there have been thousands of people claiming to be a Messiah, or they have been given the label by others, even if they did not claim it themselves. Some messianic claims are usually based upon prophecies recorded earlier in history, such as the Buddhist Maitreya legend, the second coming prophecy of the book of Revelation, the apocalyptic teachings of Zoroaster, or the Hebrew prophecies. Many people look at all messianic claims with outright skepticism. Others become avid followers of a leader whom they believe to be the fulfillment of a religious prophecy. This raises the question, has there ever been or will there ever be a genuine Messiah? How would anybody identify such a person? Anyone who successfully develops a functional science of the spirit would obviously have a legitimate claim to the title of Messiah in the teacher's sense. There is nothing mystical or apocalyptic about this. A person makes some discoveries and shares them. If this knowledge becomes widely known and results in widespread spiritual salvation, then we enter the realm of the liberator or the prophesied Messiah. How do we identify such a liberator when there exist so many different prophecies with so many different ways to interpret them? The answer is simple. The would-be liberator must succeed. That person must earn the title. It is not God-given. This is a terribly cold and uncompromising way of looking at it. It strips away the magic and mysticism normally associated with messianic prophecy. It forces any person who would claim the title of Messiah to actually bring about peace and spiritual salvation, because such a prophecy is not going to be fulfilled unless someone causes it to happen. This compels the would-be liberator to fully overcome the overwhelming obstacles which act against these universal goals. This is one of the most unbelievable tasks that any person could ever hope to undertake. He need only look at past liberators to appreciate the long, hard road that such a person must travel. To date, no one has succeeded, but it is certainly a challenge worthy of the best talents. When most people envision a Messiah, they see a person dressed in spotless white who thinks, speaks, and behaves balls. Okay. We got a technical issue here. So I'm reading this and I go, this PDF I have is fucked up. Anybody out there got a decent PDF that has pages 168 through 172? Because the copy I'm reading here cuts off at page 168 and drops to page 173, and there's none of the rest of it, and this is not acceptable. So I'll sit here for a minute and look at the chat room. If anybody in the chat room can come in the chat room and put a copy of that has pages 168 to page 172 in it in PDF format in the chat room, that would be great. That's balls. No bueno. And again, that happened. Well, it happened in one of the chapters, but I found out from a listener it was just Bible verses or something. So wasn't pertinent info. But this is like, 4 pages. So yours has missing pages too. Man, that's weird. It makes me feel like people are editing out certain chapters, and then those are the only ones that are available online. Yeah, that's weird. Anybody? Bueller? Well, that can't be the whole chapter if it goes from page 168 to page 173. Because it goes 68, 69, and then it cuts off. And then the next chapter I have is chapter 17, page 173. So obviously that's not the end of the chapter, buddy. I think we have a winner here. Let me look. Scrolling down here, Apocalypse of John, we read that. Muhammad, we read that. Bear with me here. I'm scrolling through. Messiahs and means. Okay, there's 169. No, actually, nice try, but this is the same as mine. Yeah, it cuts off and goes right to page 173. Wow, that sucks. Huh. Okay, so 70. Well, look, you don't understand, sir. It cuts off. I'm trying to tell you, there's more pages than I have here because the last page I have is page 69, and then the next page after that's 173. And the sentence says, when people envision such a Messiah, they see a person dressed in spotless white who thinks, speaks, and behaves, and then it cuts off, but that's not a complete sentence. So what I'm saying is there's more to it than I have. Oh, well, I guess there's nothing we can do about that. So I guess you're just going to have to buy a copy of William Bramley's book and read those other pages yourself. We'll continue on here. I guess there's nothing I can do. All right, chapter 17, Flying Gods Over America. Here we go. By the time of the Crusades, major dramas had unfolded on the opposite side of the globe. Great civilizations had come and gone on the American continents. It is difficult to study the history of the ancient American civilizations because nearly all original records from those civilizations were destroyed centuries ago. As a result, historians are often confronted with disputes over the most basic facts, such as dates. For example, time estimates regarding the Great Mayan civilization have placed it everywhere from 30,000 years ago to 12,000 years ago to only 700 years ago. For the purposes of this book, I will use the dates that are most commonly accepted by modern historians and archaeologists. Many archaeologists believe that the first important North American civilization was the Olmec Society of Mexico. It is estimated to have flourished from about 800 BC until 400 BC. Very little is known about the Olmecs except that they left behind impressive ruins, which included a large pyramid. The existence of the pyramid is strong evidence that there was an interaction between the old and the new worlds in the BC years. The Olmecs are believed to have given birth to the famous Mayan civilization, which followed. The Mayan culture extended from Mexico to Central America and lasted from 300 until 900 AD. Like the Olmecs, the Mayans were fond of building pyramids. Surprisingly, some Mayan pyramids were given a limestone facing, like the earlier pyramids in Egypt. The Mayans also copied the Egyptians by mummifying bodies and by holding similar beliefs about a physical afterlife, according to historian Raymond Cartier. Other analogies with Egypt are discernible in the admirable art of the Mayans. Their mural paintings and frescoes and decorated vases show a race of men with strongly marked Semitic features. Engage in all sorts of activities: agriculture, fishing, building, politics, and religion. Egypt alone has depicted these activities with the same cruel appearance of truth, but the pottery of the Mayans recalls that of the Etruscans, an ancient civilization of Italy. Their bas reliefs remind one of India, and the huge steep stairways of the pyramidal temples are like those in Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Unless they obtained their models from outside, their brains must have been so constructed that they adopted the same forms of artistic expression as all other great civilizations of Europe and Asia. Did civilization then spring from one particular geographical region and then spread gradually in every direction like a forest fire? Or did it appear spontaneously and separately in various parts of the world? Were some races the teachers and others the pupils, or were they all self-taught? Isolated seeds, or one parent stem giving off shoots in every direction? The coincidences are far too strong for the American civilizations to have arisen independently of the old world societies. Jungian theories of collective unconscious are hardly satisfactory. The striking similarities indicate that the American civilization was a part of a global society. Excuse me. Even if ancient American inhabitants were not aware of it, a similar situation exists today. In different cities around the world, we find modern skyscrapers that look remarkably alike no matter where on the globe they stand. From Singapore to Africa to the United States, it can be rather a surprise to see in a remote African nation a tall, glassy skyscraper that is virtually identical to a skyscraper in Chicago. The surrounding culture, however, may be radically different in each country, indicating that the skyscraper in Africa is not a product of the native African culture, but is the product of an independent global influence. A similar global influence clearly existed more than a millennium ago, as evidenced by the remarkable similarities between ancient Mayan and Egyptian cultures. That global influence appears to have been the custodial society, because as soon as we review ancient American writings, we encounter once again our custodial friends. Custodians were worshipped by ancient Americans as human-like gods who hailed from other worlds. As in the Eastern Hemisphere, custodians in America were eventually distinguished by a cloak of mythology. As in Egypt and Mesopotamia, custodial servants in America were the priests, who held considerable political power because of their special relationship to mankind's reported extraterrestrial masters. It is therefore not surprising to find evidence that the brotherhood existed in the ancient Americas. For example, the snake was an important religious symbol throughout the ancient Western Hemisphere. Several Freemasonic historians claim evidence of early Masonic rites in pre-Columbian societies. The brotherhood symbol of the swastika was also prominent, as Professor W. Norman Brown of the University of Pennsylvania points out on page 27 of his book, The Swastika, a study of the Nazi claims of its Aryan origin. A curious problem lies in the presence of the swastika in America before the time of Columbus. It is frequent in northern, central, and southern America and has many variant forms. The American civilizations had a similar history to that of the Old World. It was filled with wars, genocides, and calamities. Cities and religious centers in ancient America came and went. One thing that remained consistent was the building of pyramids. The Toltecs, a civilization which arose from the Mayan society, continued the pyramid building tradition and constructed the fabulous Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico. This pyramid is larger than that of the Great Pyramid of Egypt in sheer bulk and is crafted with the same stone-cutting precision that characterizes its Egyptian counterpart. When the Spaniards invaded America in the 16th century, they deliberately destroyed nearly everything they could of the ancient American culture, except for the gold and precious metals which were shipped to Spain. At that time in history, the Inquisition was at the height, and Spain was its most zealous advocate. The ancient Americans were considered pagan, and so Christian missionaries engaged in an energetic campaign to destroy all records and artifacts related to the American religions. Unfortunately, those records included priceless history and science texts. The effect of this obliteration was much like the destruction of the Alexandrian Library by Christians earlier. It created a substantial blackout regarding some of mankind's ancient history. This has left a great many unanswered questions about the Mayans. For example, the Mayans built many fabulous religious centers and then abandoned them. Some historians believe that the abandonment was done suddenly and that its cause remains a mystery. Others conclude that it was done gradually by the Mayan society as the Mayan society decayed. The Mayans were also known to practice human sacrifice. Some historians believe that the sacrifices were an intelligent ritual. Others say the sacrifices amounted to full-scale genocide, claiming 50,000 lives per year. Where does the truth lie? Back here with you on the Global Reality, right here on the Global Reality Radio Network. I'm your host, Josh Reeves. Late night Moonbat edition for you here. Now we're going to jump back into reading William Bramley's The Gods of Eden for you here tonight. And it's been a very interesting read. I'm sorry that we had the little blockage there with not getting to read little bits, but you can go back and get a hard copy of that yourself and read it. But I don't know. It just makes you wonder. It makes you feel like people are editing that out, you know, certain things out of there. I'll have to ask Mr. Bram if he's aware of that when we have him on the 18th. But again, let's jump back into this now. One book has surfaced which purports to be a record of ancient Mayan beliefs. It is known as the Popol Vuh, the Council Book. The Popol Vuh is not a genuinely ancient work. It was first written in the 16th century by an unknown Mayan. It was later translated into Spanish by Father Francisco Jimenez of the Dominican Order. Jimenez's translation was first published in Vienna in 1857